Hello, everyone. I'm Quentin Lister, and I'm here today with Irene Bradford, LCSW, for our Utah Family Law TV interview this week. And Irene, before we get going here, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself and provide name and contact information for those watching at home who would like to speak with you after this interview.
Hi, my name is Irene Bradford. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm with a company called Simple Modern, and we're right downtown Salt Lake. You can reach me at irene@simplemodern.org, or you can call or text our main number at 801-920-7112.
Thank you so much. And so Irene and I spoke briefly before we started this interview, and we've been in contact with each other before we met today. And one thing that she mentioned was that she works mainly with couples, with people who are not necessarily with families that are already divorced or co-parenting parents who are in that situation. But given that our audience is those who are either divorced or going through a divorce or some sort of domestic relation case, what value do you see as far as couples therapy is concerned for those who are maybe not necessarily like they're either thinking about divorce or maybe they're currently separated from their spouse, that kind of thing? What value do you see in it for them as far as couples therapy is concerned?
So couples therapy is really designed for couples who both partners, or as many partners are in the relationship, are committed to making it work. I actually do some work with couples who are divorced or separated that time, but are hoping to make another go of the relationship. When one person is leaning out of the relationship, or even both partners are leaning out of the relationship, I tend to do something called discernment counseling, which is designed to help couples explore one of three paths, or whatever, families or partners.
Right.
A lot of polyamorous families too, so I'm trying to loop them in. So for couples who are designed or to explore one of three paths, path one is leaving things as they are, which most people find untenable. And then path two is a separation or divorce of the relationship. And then I work with those couples to find a lawyer or mediator who's more family oriented, rather than both couples getting their own lawyer, and that tends to get very ugly. And if couples do select path two, I also do work with them to bring in typically the children or other stakeholders in the relationship, and how to refer them to co-parenting resources, or tell their children, and really assess if that's the best option for them. And then path three, which is my favorite option, obviously, is a 6-month all-out commitment for couples therapy, where divorce or separation of any kind is off the table. And then at the end of the 6 months of our work, they get to kind of reassess if that's something they want to do.
Yeah, awesome. Well, yeah, so that sounds like there's a lot of potential value then there as for people who are either thinking about divorce or are currently separated or something like that. And so when you talk about most people don't want to leave things as they are. What do you find is the difference between those who either say like okay, I don't want to leave things as they are and I want it to end, versus people are like, okay, I don't want to leave things as they are, but maybe there might be something here that we can work on. Like that kind of, what is it? Is it like a change in, like, do you see like there's just like there's certain people who like they have a hard time going in like a more like, like let's try to keep things together mindset, or like what is the difference between the people who decided like, okay, I don't want it to keep going and let's end it, versus okay, I can't keep going like this, what can we do to fix it? Like what's the difference there, do you find?
Typically there's one leaning in spouse or partner who, even if there's some egregious sin committed, they do want to salvage the relationship. And as you know, well, divorce is a really hard life change to go through. And then within the clients that are wanting to divorce, people tend to seek therapy when they're not quite sure, and just kind of helping them flesh out what are their reasons for divorce. And we actually look for 3 different options. Divorce is relief, divorce is kind of like a dream that they may be wanting to reach. And then divorce as like a letting go, like a sad letting go. And those tend to be more the clients that are going to really get divorced, the ones that are kind of resigned to letting go. But people that are reaching for something that, like maybe an affair partner or high school sweetheart or something, those tend to land in that other camp of like reaching for a long lost something.
Right.
And then divorce's relief tends to come from a lot of conflict, maybe an
Right.
affair, substance use issue. And so then we work with both couples to kind of, for the leaning in partner to really understand what happened in the marriage. And that's a question that we ask upon our first session. How did things get the way they are now? And getting both partners to kind of take ownership. And the people that do tend towards divorce, they're not able to take ownership, either or both of them. And so we have not a lot of substance to work with there.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
It does. Yes, it does. That makes sense. Right. Yeah. And so those three things you mentioned, the whole idea of like, so we have divorce as relief, or divorce as a sad letting go. And then if you remind me of the third one, I know you mentioned the third one, like divorce.
I can't remember the phrasing in the like.
Right. But
it's like an idealization. Like if I get divorced, I'll be happy, or I can, then go on this dream cruise with some guy or whatever.
Right.
And that tends to be very built in fantasy and not reality.
Right. I know. What is it? From my experience, I'm a legal secretary. I have limited experience. I'm relatively new at my job, but I've been at it long enough to see multiple people, both like who are in the midst of a divorce and then people at the very beginning of a divorce. And there are many who it's like the ones that you really feel for are the people who like looking for divorce as relief, because oftentimes they'll have like one, like it seems like their partner isn't really either isn't like as like all that isn't, how do I put this delicately, like they're not taking ownership in one way, shape, or form, like you said. Like I see a lot of people college is like I can't handle this anymore. I can't, like, so I'm suing for divorce for as kind of like a relief thing. And so how do you keep, you mentioned that when people do like work with you and then they decide, okay, divorce is our best option, that's what we're going for, is it always successful in terms of keeping it like from getting too confrontational, right? Like you mentioned that you try to help them find like a family oriented lawyer or a mediator or something like that, someone who can help things not become as like contentious as they would say if both parties went and got their own lawyers. Are you always successful in helping them like find that resolve to go through it in a non-confrontational way?
So I don't see couples as they are going through the divorce process. So I can't tell you how successful I am through the whole thing. I have noticed, and research really indicates that it is better for both individuals and typically the children when we do a more of a collaborative divorce. And I always like to, which doesn't always work, schedule a session or two afterwards to kind of discuss what divorce really means. What are both partners' hopes and dreams in getting divorced? And then help the partner who is fighting for the marriage really understand what this is going to look like, what co-parenting is going to look like, and then set them up with those counselors that can do more co-parenting when the couple's not together.
Sure,
So
right.
So those supports tend to make it easier in a really, really hard time.
Right.
I can't speak to what they are like in a year or 5 years.
Right. I understand that, and I was just curious to see like if you like, yeah, but that makes sense that, right, like you're after, you've kind of like helped them find the resources they need, right? It's their time to like finalize the divorce and everything. You don't necessarily help them through that. I understand that. And so but I was curious in that sense. And so okay. So Right. How and so how do you, I guess I'm thinking about the people who might be watching this or whatever who are separated and whatnot, and they're wondering like whether or not divorce is their best option or whatnot. How do you, what are some ways, like you said, like for instance, like the first question, one of the first questions you ask when you know meet with a couple initially is like, okay, how did things get to this point, right? What's happened in the relationship to this point so far? And so from there, how, what are some ways that you help gauge and see like whether or not like divorce is like their best option? Like how do you help people determine like, okay, so maybe we're on two different paths, or maybe like, okay, like this person isn't taking ownership for what they're doing, so I need to like, how do you help the couple, like, or how do you help them kind of determine whether or not divorce is their best option after that, like kind of initial, like once we figure out where the relationship is, what's then the next step in like determining like, okay, is terminating it the best thing or not?
So, discernment counseling is actually pretty different than couples counseling in that there's very little time together as a couple. The
Mm,
first session, there's about 30 to 45 minutes where the three of us would meet together and I would ask a series of questions. And then I always meet with them separately. And there's
sure.
a little overlap of time in the middle where they are given the opportunity to share what they've learned from our conversation. And we start with the leaning out partner, and these are my issues and why I'm considering it. And then at the end of every session, I ask, would you like to schedule another one? So it's not like a series of treatment where typical mental health is like
Yeah.
you will every week for a month or not a month, 6 months or a year or whatever.
Right.
So we kind of, and then we explore with the leaning in partner. Do you really understand where your partner is coming from? And are you willing to be the champion for the relationship? And I tend to get a lot of pushback on that question, like, we're both here, why should I have to do it? And it's essentially because someone has to, and you have to fight for it if you want this right now. In
Mhm.
couples therapy, it needs to be generally equal,
Right.
but right, this is up to you. And if they can, and sometimes they can't.
Right.
But and yeah, does that answer your question?
Um, yes, I think it does. And so, yeah, and so in this type of counseling, right? Like, I mean, so it wouldn't be like typically what we picture, like, like, like for instance, like a husband and wife both sitting like in like two chairs and then the therapist and like a third chair, whatever. This is like we're getting, you get one-on-one time with each
Mm-hmm.
partner in the relationship. Okay, and so that makes sense. And so you say you get a lot of pushback when sometimes on the question like, are you willing to be like the champion for like the relationship and whatnot? What are some for those people who are leaning in? What kind of keeps them from? And so you mentioned partially like probably like they don't feel like they should be the only one like fight. Is it kind of like they don't feel like they should be the only one fighting for it? Is that kind of one of the main pushbacks you get?
Yeah, because usually it's both partners that have done different things to harm the other partner.
Right.
It's really one person, which then we would assess differently because then it's something like domestic violence, which is a different,
Sure.
totally different avenue.
Sure.
But I just try to reiterate that someone has to fight for the relationship now. This isn't going to last forever. It's only 5 sessions, which typically conclude within a month or a month and a half. And then hopefully we will land in the path 3, 6 months, all out couples therapy. And so someone has to take ownership and kind of just reassuring them that their partner will get there if they select to do the 6 months of couples therapy.
Right.
Um, that they will have to take ownership as well, but someone has to right now.
Right. Right. And so, and I can understand, right? Like if, especially if each party has been at fault in one way or another, it might be hard for someone who is leaning in to be like, oh wait, I have to be the main catalyst for it, because right, it's like, well, does that like negate like my suffering or something like that? And it's interesting that you bring that up because I think a lot of times I've seen like with people that we work with that are going through divorce and whatnot, that kind of they also don't see like even when they've decided that like they need to like go through divorce and like they're going through the process, they're litigating that kind of thing, they want out of the relationship. They also don't realize how why they need to be like a responsible adult to
Mm-hmm.
their ex to their ex-spouse, right? And that
Mm-hmm.
causes confrontation when they're like trying to just work through just like sharing custody of a child, that kind of thing. Like they don't realize like, oh, like I actually need to, communicate with my ex-spouse, even though I don't want to, and they're mean, like that kind of thing. Like, it's just like that natural human reaction to like be mean back or to, that kind of thing. And so yeah, that's interesting. I see that parallel, I guess, as you were saying. I think that's a parallel to even people who go through and they want to terminate the relationship and get divorced, that kind of thing. Like they're still kind of like, even if they're not fighting to like keep the relationship together, like in order to like make it the most smooth transition as possible, one person has to
Be
at
bigger.
least one person has to own up and own their stuff and be an adult in that sense. So that's
Yeah.
interesting to me. And so yeah, well, I don't know. And so as far as discernment counseling is concerned, like, so is Howard is um like how often, let's see. And so I'm trying to think of how to phrase my question. What exactly do you feel like is the kind of like the main thing? Like if someone is like thinking like, yeah, I want to try this discernment counseling thing. I want to see if it can help me, figure out where I'm at in my relationship. What, how would you suggest how would you suggest that person, like, what things do you think they should consider before reaching out and trying it out? What things do they need to consider on their own end before they start the process?
Hmm. I think anytime someone is going to start therapy, it's an important question to ask oneself if they're emotionally willing and time willing and financially able to commit to something like this.
Mhm.
Because we don't accept insurance, so
Sure.
for like this is more of a financial commitment than some others. But it is still a huge time commitment and emotional commitment. And if they have the, I don't know, bandwidth to do that, I think is a good question.
Sure. Right. Like whether or not they're willing to actually, because it's right. It's like it's whatever it's going to be work and it's going to take resources to do it. Right. And so are you actually willing to try to work through it and get through it? Okay. That makes sense. I think that's a good question. Yeah. I know we've been talking here for almost um I actually haven't been keeping track of exactly how long we've been talking here, but I know that I promised you a 10-15 minute interview, and so I want to keep it close
Go
to
ahead.
that. And so do you have any closing thoughts? Anything that you wanted to say, maybe that my questions didn't prompt, or anything like that you'd like to share before we end?
I think if someone's considering therapy, it's also can be really important to call and ask for to do an intake call, to see if the therapist is a good fit, finding a list of questions. So even if you're considering it and you don't want to commit to the full thing, I think that can be really helpful.
Hmm.
And actually, with counseling, we tend to do an intake call anyway to be prepared
Sure.
and ask a series of questions to see if it's a good fit. So
Yeah. Well, it's awesome, and um, I appreciate your time, Irene. I think we'll wrap up now, but I wanted to give you the opportunity one more time to just share your basic contact information for those who would want to get in touch with you after viewing this video.
oh. I'm Irene Bradford. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm with a company called Simple Modern. Our number is 801-920-7112, or you can reach out directly to me at irene@simplemodern.org. And it's IRENE.
Yes. All right. Thank you, Irene. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.